So that's why... Oh, we're back! So, thank you for joining us once again. We are going to look at the next card without any further ado. It's another transformational card. Hadana's Climb.
Also a legendary enchantment, as before.
But it's not Boros, it is Simic, plus 1 generic. At the beginning of combat on your turn. So, again, stopping there, it can have almost an immediate effect.
Right.
This is good. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, if that creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Hadana's Climb. Mandatory transform. It turns into the Winged Temple of Arazka. Noting, as a shout out, this is art by none other than Titus Lunger. A legendary land that you can tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Again, really nice.
Not bad.
But what's its special ability? For 1 green, blue, tap, target creature you control gains flying and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power. I could put that in Sliver Hivelord if I had ways to throw counters on it, which I don't.
It's no accident that this artwork on the front has a merfolk on it. This is very much going to be a sought-after piece for the merfolk decks, even if you're just running 2. Because again, merfolks do care about +1 counters.
Yeah.
And I like how the front side fuels the back side. The front side gives the creature more power, so that when you pay 3 and tap, it's more worthwhile.
And looking at the comments, everyone seems to have consensus that Azuri Claw of Progress is going to love this card.
Yes.
Love this card.
I think the best part about it, all things considered, is the fact that it can give flying. Now, flying is something that there is option for in Standard. I have seen some homebrewed mono blue flyers decks. However, against a lot of the meta decks that are around right now, flying is essentially unblockable. You know, because people tend to swing with their Glory Bringers when they play them, meaning they're not around to block. So that kind of evasion on what would otherwise be a small, unimportant creature can make a big difference. Especially when attacking planeswalkers.
Very true, very true. The art's fantastic. Good job, Titus. Next up is Profane Procession. Another legendary enchantment for 1 white, black. This one doesn't have any immediate effect unless you've got some mana to funnel into it, but black and white are costly colors sometimes. 3 white, black. Exile target creature. Then, if there are 3 or more cards exiled with Profane Procession, transform it into Tomb of the Dusk Rose. Again, it adds 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, so I like that these thus far they require 2 colors, and that then you can use them for either color once they transform. That's pretty solid design. You can pay 2 white-black tap, put a creature card exiled with this permanent onto the battlefield under your control. Here's the thing about this, is you know exactly what you're going to get out of it maximally, because you can only exile up to 3. Unless you like float the abilities in weird ways. But it's 3. It says 3 or more cards exiled with Profane Procession. I actually don't see how you're going to get more, because as soon as the 3rd one is exiled, it checks and it will flip.
That is true. The next
I think they're
would
doing that
continue
just
to
for
exile.
consistent wording.
Right, right.
I mean, the effects, you can layer them, but the transformation will still happen as each ability resolves. I think they're just doing that for consistent wording, because I don't see how in any situation it's going to get more than 3. So then it turns into a land that you can then put those 3 creatures that you stole into play under your control. But let's look at the cost. You pay 3 mana to play it. You pay 15 mana to flip it, plus the 3, so that's 18 mana. Then to get those 3 creatures back into play, it takes 3 additional turns and another 12 mana. 15, 12, 27 plus 3, 30 mana to get 3 creatures from your opponent.
It's a lot of mana.
It's a lot of mana.
I think what people are going to be the most attracted to with this card is that it is a repeatable source of non-conditional removal.
This is true.
To be able to pay 5 and exile whatever's the biggest threat at the time to you is something worth paying for.
Now, 30 mana, it's a huge amount of mana, but that's the total amount paid over multiple turns. Realistically, you're going to drop this out on, like, turn 3. Then on turn 5, you're going to exile a creature in response to combat or something like that. Then on turn 6, you'll do it again. Then on turn 7, you'll do it again, and it'll flip. Okay. Then you'll have a land. Then on turn 8, you'll put a land into play. Then you'll put a creature into play. Then turn 9, at their end step, you put another one into play. Then you do this at your end step. This is built for a control deck.
Right.
100% it's for a control deck. And it fits neatly in colors that already like exiling creatures.
Right. I think the biggest strike against it is that it does take
so
long to get online when there are very fast options available to players in Standard.
Yeah.
But don't discount it just yet.
It's a lot of mana. Now, let's go to the first one that they spoiled. Probably the most bonkers one.
And from what I've seen on the pages that I've seen on the internet, also potentially the most expensive as well.
Oh yeah. Storm the Vault. Blue, red, and 2. Legendary enchantment. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player. Okay, doing our analysis as we've done, this can have almost immediate effect. You play at your first main, go to combat, you have to connect. Then you start getting effects. What effects do you get? Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a colorless treasure artifact token that has sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of color. We know what treasure does. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 5 or more artifacts, transform Storm the Vault. Again, mandatory.
Very good.
Turns into Vault of Catlacan. Catlacan?
Potentially.
Catlachan? I don't know. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Alright, very good. Then, it says, add 1 blue mana to your mana pool.
For each
artifact you control.
That's a lot of blue mana.
See, brief stepping away from this spoiler to step into another spoiler. In the next set, Dominaria, we're getting Teferi. Teferi is coming back. No, it's not like Leet speak for the fairy. Teferi, for you new kids on the block, is a very powerful pre-mending planeswalker. And I have some questions as to how he's still around, but I'm not super familiar with the old lore to know the ultimate fate of Teferi as was decided back then. But anyways, Teferi was known to come from the Tolarian Academy.
Yes.
And now we know he's coming in the next set.
Correct.
Probably coming after his Tolarian Academy.
Sounds about right.
It's a better Tolarian Academy because it can tap for mana even if you don't have any artifacts. It's much like the totally not strictly better Gaia's Cradle that they printed.
Right. Now, you will notice that this slots most easily, even based on the artwork, into the Pirates tribe. Now, that's very interesting because Pirates, more than the other tribes, have evasion. Everything from menace to flying to even something like haste or first strike. So, theoretically, this could pay you back the turn you get it out. For instance, if you drop it when you have 5 creatures that can connect, even if they're 1/1s, then you immediately would then get 5 treasure artifacts. At the beginning of the end step, you would flip it, and not only would you then have 5 artifacts you could sack for any color, but before doing so, you could tap for 5 blue mana.
I'm tempted to try this out in Modern Affinity, to be honest. Well, I am and I'm not, and here's why. At first glance, I'm like, ooh, Affinity, I'll have a pile of artifacts, and this will just flip by itself, and I don't even have to connect. But then I have to ask myself the question, what do I need that mana for in Affinity? It would mean I'd be doing a very different kind of Affinity deck.
One much more focused on
now,
this
card, you could do a weird, more control Affinity thing, because this card will get through Red Sun. Which we'll talk about when it rises. The next card I am super stoked about because Golgari Mage right now.
The only one that's an aura.
He's true. He's through. Journey to Eternity. 1 black-green legendary enchantment aura. enchant creature you control, because it's an aura. When enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control, then return Journey to Eternity to the battlefield, transformed under your control. Boop! A little bit of animate dead stuff going on here. Turns into Atzal, Cave of Eternity. Again, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Pay 3 black and green tap. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is automatically going to reanimate a creature.
Right.
Just whenever it dies. And this will flip immediately. So if you have a sack outlet, it'll just whoop, Gray Merchant or any number of creatures that like to do stuff like that.
Re-triggers and enters the battlefield effect. Dodges a lot of destroy removal.
But then you can just pay 5 mana to reanimate.
It's a really solid land. Like, typically you would think that the backside, in this case, would also be some manner of enchantment or artifact, but it's still a land. It still taps for mana when you need it. And I really like the way that the art and flavor text kind of transition from the front to the back in this one, to where you see the old man going into the cave
and the young man coming out.
The young man coming out of the cave.
It's really nice.
Very well
Great
designed
job,
card.
artist with the long name. So that's the initial set of flip cards. Let's start looking at the next cycle of cards, which are the primals. Not the primevals of Diablos, but we have... I'll let you take these away because you're the dino man in the house.
I play a lot of dinosaurs, and I'll have you know, I was a little surprised to see that they did end up printing a blue one and a black one. Of course, I couldn't be too surprised after I realized it was a cycle, and after they spoiled the black one first. However, when they first spoiled a black dinosaur, I was very confused until I realized that this entire elder, or rather primal set of dinosaurs is all going to work in very interesting ways. The first one we have here is going to be Zetalpa, Primal Dawn. 6 white. So, of course, that'll be reminiscent of very large angels, very large flying creatures that white often has at that level. And this is no different. It is a 4/8 legendary elder dinosaur with not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 keywords. So you get your money's worth, in a way. It has flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I missed the indestructible when I read it the first time.
As did I. I didn't exactly catch that.
I read like 4 keywords, so I'm like, okay, it's fine, it's good, it's fine.
Yep. And sure enough, if you can tap a Odapek Huntmaster to give it haste, or any of the other dino synergistic effects...
Because it doesn't have enough keywords already.
Right. So, the thing that holds this back with regards to the other elder dinosaurs is that it's just essentially a really good beater. And even going on from there, as we'll see later, it's also basically the most expensive one to get out. So, is it worth it
in a
for
color
8
that doesn't
mana?
ramp very well either.
Exactly. Is it possible to play it? Yes. Will you definitely want to play it and enjoy playing it? Yes. But
does it fit in any mono-white commander deck that you just want to beat someone in the head with? That's the other big thing here is it's not dinosaur-centric. Well, actually, none of these are like specifically dinosaur geared, but this commander could literally just be, I have this mono-white deck that I'm running. I don't know who to run as a commander. I'll just run Zetalpa Primal Dawn because I always have Plan B, which is the giant dinosaur
in the air. He would have to compete with a Chroma as well as Avacyn, which would be some hard lineups there. But say you don't have an Avacyn or can't afford one, etc.
Or if you want something that hits a little harder and is in some weird ways just trickier.
I will say that as far as Voltron goes, this is a prime commander for Voltron.
It is.
And that is because he has natural double strike, which is, on large creatures, very hard to come by.
Because they know it's good.
Super good.
He's coming in for 8 with trample, and the double strike and trample is also a combo you don't see too often on creatures.
And we can't forget vigilance, making him essentially an indestructible blocker. So if you get this guy in limited, you can have 39 lands in this guy and still technically be able to win the game.
Because, well, there's a lot of exile.
Yes.
He is soft to exile, but then again, most things are unless you're hexproof, and they've not really been doing too much hexproof lately. They're kind of shying away.
There are
from
some
that.
instants that give it till end of turn, but yeah.
Native hexproof is something. I mean,
Right.
we had the Carnage Tyrant.
We have the Merfolk.
They got
tokens.
the hexproof out of their system for now. But he's a really just. I kind of, like I said, I see him as, I have a white commander deck, because I play primarily commander. That's like, I have a white commander deck. I don't know who I want to be the commander of this white commander deck.
There you go.
He's an amazing placeholder for that.
So, moving on to arguably the more powerful dinosaurs.
One final word, in which I would say he's superior to Avacyn if you're running a spells-based white deck. Because Avacyn is going to make your permanents indestructible. If you don't really care about your permanents, you're running more spells, this is an excellent guy to defend with spells and just push him through.
If you are running some kind of like mono-white control deck, where you're looking to not let your opponents untap their lands, not let your opponents untap their creatures, this guy can be a heck of a finisher. If you're even running things like Ghostly Prison, making it harder for them to attack you, again, can be a really great guy for mono-white control. So moving on from there, we have Nazahal Primal Tide. Now, typically, large creatures and blue don't often go together. They do. They have like Leviathans, and you know, if you play Commander a lot, you have Consecrated Sphinx, Jin Gitaxias, things like that. So you know that when they bother to go out of their way to print a very large blue creature, they're going to try to give it a very strong effect.
Yeah.
And this is no exception. Nazahal Primal Tide can't be countered. And I think that blue players care a little bit more about that than even most other players, with the exception of maybe green players.
Yeah.
You have no maximum hand size. Again, gold to a blue player's ears, because that means they can draw as many cards as they want. But how are they going to draw those cards? His third line, which is perhaps one of the strongest lines of text from the entire set.
Yeah.
Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card.
It is mandatory.
It is.
So if your opponent can like wheel a spell, they can force you to deck out.
Exactly.
So you do have to be choosy and careful.
But I do think that most blue players will be okay with that, at very least in Standard, where there's not a whole lot of shenanigans going on in that regard. But yes, whenever your opponent casts a non-creature spell. Now, I will note that they did opt to print this in a creature-heavy set.
This is true.
Or what I would consider, with all these tribes running around, to be a creature-heavy set. So this guy might not be as good as he would be in, say, Kaladesh, where everyone's casting artifacts, etc. His final ability, as if that were not enough, is evasion to protect him, which he can use his other abilities to fuel. It says, discard 3 cards to exile Nazahal, then return him to the battlefield tapped under his owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So say they go to...
He Aetherlings.
Right. Say they go to
For the
remove
cost of
him,
3 cards.
kill him, exile him, etc. A, they probably cast a non-creature spell to do that, which means you got to draw a card. And then B, so that you then had to discard 3 cards, which I think with how many cards he'll probably draw you, you don't mind in order to protect your large, imposing threat. So as a commander, this guy could be seriously incredible.
Let's also not decline to mention the one thing that we did mention about this card is he's a 7/7 for 7.
I did forget to mention that. I got so caught up in everything else.
He has perfect mana equity, so even if he was a vanilla creature, he's still a good creature.
Right. His body is solid.
But he is not a vanilla creature.
No, he is, and I'm honestly surprised they didn't have to make him mythic, and I think it's only because he found himself in a rare cycle.
Oh yeah, that's true. All these elder dinosaurs are in a rare cycle.
Right, they are not mythics.
But you know, some of them deserve that, and this is where I don't know if this is going to be an unpopular opinion or not. Let's look at the black one. I don't like him that much.
Really?
I'm not a huge fan, but then again, I'm looking at him strictly from a commander standpoint, and I think for commander he's terrible.
Huh.
Because Tetzimok Primal Death is a 6/6 for 6. Okay, he has equity. This is good. Technically they all have equity.
Right.
But he's a 6/6 for 6 with Death Touch. And that's where his usefulness in Commander ends. Because he has an ability, pay a black, reveal him from your hand, Put a prey counter on target creature. Activate this ability only during your turn. You can activate it at instant speed, but it has to be on your turn. When he enters the battlefield, destroy each creature your opponents control with a prey counter on it. So his ability and his ETB are irrelevant in Commander unless you put him in your hand somehow, which is already...
Well...
If you're doing shenanigans in mono black to put your commander in your hand, you're playing Phage.
Well, and I don't think that he would necessarily belong in the command zone. I think he would be more like a removal creature, like a lot of the black creatures as they destroy target non-black creature when they enter.
If he's in a commander deck,
right,
that's different. I'm evaluating. I see legendary creature, I immediately think, can he be a good commander?
As a creature, as a commander, he's just a 6/6 Death Toucher, which is nothing.
Yeah.
But in a commander deck, think about this: if you have enough mana to cast him, right? If you have somewhere between 5 this turn and then 6 the next turn, or 6 this turn, either way, you can essentially pay 6 mana if you have enough to cast him. Put a prey counter on 6 things, such that when you pay the 6 you already have next turn to cast him, you're getting a 6/6 Death Touch for 6 that kills 6 creatures.
Yeah.
Which, and even then, say you want to play like a 4-drop or a 5-drop and this guy's in your opening hand, you have nothing to do with the 1 extra mana you have floating around. You can actually get use out of that by revealing from your hand and knowing that you'll be able to kill that creature later.
For a control deck, I see this card being an excellent finisher, especially once the Scarab God rotates.
Yes.
Even with the Scarab God, because this guy will synergize amazingly with the Scarab God, because here's what you do. They both cost 6, so if you draw one or the other in whatever order...
Scarab God costs 5.
Oh, well, see? Even better. But what this guy will do, on turn 1, you play a black land of some flavor. You put a prey counter on something. Turn 2, you can put 2 prey counters on things. Turn 3, 3. Turn 4, 4. So let's see, 1, 3. A lot of prey counters, and by the time you drop Scarab God, then on the next turn you drop this guy, nuke their board, and look, all this stuff in the graveyard for the Scarab God to go munchies on.
Honestly, as a creature, pretty solid.
Even, like, ignoring the synergy with the Scarab God, the ability to go turn 1, I'm gonna just start marking stuff, and it's a Doom Clock, and they're gonna want to not play their creatures until after turn 6 when this guy hits play, once they know you've got him, because they know that you can just sit there as long as you want and go pray as many times as you want, and then on turn 6 go, everything I prayed dies.
Even beyond that, black tends to run a lot of removal, but there are certain creatures you don't want to have to spend a removal card on.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, say they have a 1/1 with haste,
or like a
1
3/3 Dino token.
Right, where you can now kill creatures that you wouldn't want to have to spend a removal spell on.
You can just include them in the prey count.
So, honestly, solid dude.
I'm just imagining someone like storming off with the prey count on one turn and then just going off on the next turn.
And the Death Touch is not irrelevant either.
But, you know, storming is probably more relevant for the next card.
Now, I will say this is, out of all of them, the one I'm the most excited to play. Because I think that
the one
his
you're
ability,
most primed for?
Yes. Italy, maybe. Italy Primal Storm is a 6/6 legendary dino for 6. He has no keywords. Not trample, not haste, not flying for some reason. Nothing. He has no static abilities. He has no activated abilities. All he has is one triggered ability. He says, whenever Italy Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. If there was ever
it's a mono red
creature,
Jaleva.
yeah, if there were ever a creature that you wanted to give haste, this is the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he doesn't have to connect, he just has to attack.
Doesn't have to connect, just has to attack. In Commander, doesn't even have to attack the person you're trying to get the card from. Can just attack whoever has the worst blockers at the time. And as far as Standard goes, the amount of ways that there are to cheapen and haste enable this creature are staggering. Not even Otepec Huntmaster. There was one from Amonkhet, a 1/1 with 1 red that can tap to give a creature haste. I don't know why you play him over Otepec, but even that.
Why not
like,
both?
if you can cast this guy for, 5, even 4 mana, and then have him attack immediately, the amount of things that you could hit off of him are incredible. And even if you don't hit anything that's like 6, 7, 8 mana, even just hitting like a 2 mana, 3 mana spell can really swing the game.
I mean, worst
in your
case,
favor.
you rip a land off the top of their deck.
Best case, you put that legendary aura, Journey to Eternity, on him from the other person's deck.
And then we have one that every mono green player has lost their collective sanity over.
Galta.
Galta. I thought it was a T. Galta Primal Hunger. I told you it was my bad eye. It costs X less to cast, where X is the total number of creatures you control, and it has trample. It's a 12/12. So why X less? Because it costs 2 green and 10.
Yes. And you did get the wording slightly wrong there, James. It's not where X is the number of creatures you control.
The total power.
It's the total power among creatures you control. Now
That's better.
Makes a big difference. We've already seen things like Carnage Tyrant, Regisar Alpha, these big dinosaurs in this set to where you could have 2 creatures out, and this guy could be as little as 2 mana for a 12/12 with trample.
This also makes him phenomenal as a commander because his commander tax starts paying for itself.
Right, exactly.
Again, as long as you have creatures on board.
Right. The discount, for those who are unaware, anytime your commander has a discount to his casting cost, it can help to pay for commander tax.
Alright, let's accelerate a little bit. We're going to take a look at some mythics that are scattered around here. We have a Time Stream Navigator. It's a creature, human, pirate, wizard.
That's a lot of types on a single creature.
And it has Ascend, one of the new keywords from the set, and it's really cool because it's not really interactable. Meaning that once you get it, you have it, and that's it.
I was surprised when I first read the Ascend mechanic, but having taken time to percolate and think about what it means and its applications, I'm actually very excited to utilize it.
I'm not saying it's broken, I'm just saying it's another uninteractable mechanic, which they already said energy was kind of a problem, but then again, this, you either have it or you don't have it. It's like a superior version of Monarch.
Ascend as a mechanic, is going to depend on 2 things. A, how easy it is to acquire given the things available to us at the time, which, granted, with all these tokens running around and your lands even counting toward it, I could see this being very easy to acquire. And then B, how many cards there are that actually care about Ascend that are meta playable.
Yeah, that is also a big deal. Because you could have cards that are really phenomenal that sees 0 play in literally anything. We're looking at you, Arlen Cord.
Poor Arlen Cord. I liked her.
I liked her too.
I didn't play her.
No one did.
But I liked her.
So, the Time Stream Navigator, what does Ascend do? Ascend simply says, if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. What does the City's Blessing do? It actually doesn't do anything by itself, but cards care about whether you have it or not. So what happens here? In the case of the Time Stream Navigator, which is a 1/1 for 2, by the way, mythic, pay 2 blue and tap. Put Time Stream Navigator on the bottom of its owner's library. Take an extra turn after this one. Activate this ability only if you have the City's Blessing. So if you don't have the City's Blessing, it's a 1/1 for 2.
Now, it will be interesting to see that you can run 4 of these. So again, just because you put this one on the bottom doesn't mean you won't necessarily see any others.
There could be extra turns .deck in Standard that it starts wheeling through stuff, but
that depends on whether or not we'll be able to tutor for Time Stream Navigator.
or if you can draw enough cards.
Right.
Alright, let's scroll down to the next mythic. We have the Trapjaw Tyrant. It is a dinosaur. It's a 5/5 for 5. We're getting a lot of good creature equity in this set, and I can appreciate that. It has Enrage, another returning mechanic. Whenever Trapjaw Tyrant is dealt damage, exile target creature an opponent controls until Trapjaw Tyrant leaves the battlefield.
That's really good. But I will say this much for the Trapjaw Tyrant.
O-Ring Enrage.
This is the only mythic dinosaur I did not pre-order.
Really?
He's a 5/5 for 5, which is fine. But you've got to understand that the 5-drop slot in the dinosaur deck is already taken by the ever useful and ever playable Registar Alpha.
Yeah.
And as much as there could be the ability to add another 5-drop, this guy doesn't have any keywords for combat. He has to enrage, so there's that, which, based on what we'll see later in the set, very doable. But it only exiles them until he leaves the field. My main concern with this guy is that you'll dump all this work into enraging him, only to have him get exiled or killed at instant speed when it's even worse for you than if he had just never exiled them, because suddenly they have all these blockers that they did not have before. They're retriggering their enters the battlefield effects. This guy is designed to essentially get things out of the way for a time.
Yeah.
But I find him
like
very...
O-Ring.
I find him very killable.
He's a killable O-Ring. This
Right.
is true. Let's look at the next rare/mythic in line, and that is Admiral's Order.
Woo!
It's a 1 blue instant that has Raid. If you attacked with a creature this turn, you may pay blue rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Counter target spell. What?
The aggro strategy is not one where good blue cards are often printed. In fact, the last one that stuck out to me was Biden to Thassa. But whenever Wizards does decide to print blue aggressive cards, they're always some of my favorites. Even just as much as like a 2/1 flyer for 1 or 2.
I mean, at first glance, this card is more powerful than it looks, and then you realize it's not as powerful as it looks, but it's still insanely powerful, because
Right.
to pay 1 measly mana to counter a spell flat, to make it a superior swan song, you have to attack. So it means you're doing something on your turn.
Right.
Now, this is really great if you have gone to combat, declared attackers, and then
Right.
they try to swords or do something or
Right.
wipe away, and
Settle
then
the
you go,
wreckage.
1 mana, that's what I meant.
Right.
1 mana, no you don't.
So let's think about this. There's really 3 elements here. One, it's always just a cancel on their turn. On their turn, it's only ever just a cancel, which, considering that
It's a
this is
cancel
set-
that has an option to be...
Right.
It is a cancel that has a conditional option to be the strongest counter spell printed in a long.
The other 2 factors are on your turn, either before combat or after combat or during combat. Before combat, again, same thing as their turn, it's just a cancel.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to move to combat and they're like, and they want to do something, it's just a cancel.
Still a cancel.
But when you're in combat, having already declared attackers, or when you're post-combat, even in your second main phase, this thing becomes amazing.
This card really will favor the players who have ingrained into their heads to not play things until their second main.
This is not a control player's dream.
No,
it's not. This
it's
is
an aggro protection suite.
Protection suite. And
Absolutely.
not only that, but this does have to compete with Disallow.
This might fit into my wife's Ojutai Commander deck.
Yes. Honestly, if you're in Commander and you're looking for just 1 more counterspell that costs less than 3, this could be the one for you.
Yeah. Looking at the next card, this is one of 2 cards that really stood out to me in this set. We haven't gotten to the other one yet. But this card stood out to me, not necessarily because of what it does in what it is, but because it does what it is and is not a legendary creature. Because if it was a legendary creature, it would break Commander in half.
It's pretty good.
The Twilight Prophet is a 2/4 Vampire Cleric for 2 and 2 black. Again, it's not legendary.
The artwork on this is just so good.
Oh, the artwork is phenomenally good.
So good.
It has flying, so it's evasive. This is good. It has Ascend, so if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing.
In case we didn't say it, it's a 2/4.
It's a 2/4. Again, really good. The only thing better than a 2/3 is a 2/4.
Oh, there you go.
2/5 is just weird, and they're usually not that good.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. This sounds a lot like a Dark Confidant ability.
Yeah.
So you're expecting to, some life to be paid to
Old Bob.
Yeah, you're expecting some life to be paid for this. But here's the thing.
I don't know.
Here's the thing, though. Life is going to be paid for this ability. just not yours. Each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. I have to confess, I missed the part where you gain the life too. I was thinking they just lost it, and it was still an amazing
So, of course, modern players will gawk at this statement, but for only 2 more mana to have the same card drawing effect that's not only for 1 extra mana it causes them to lose a life instead of you, but then for another mana after that causes you to gain the life instead of having to lose it in the first place. So a double reversal on the expectation of Dark Confidant. I mean, in Standard especially, this thing is a powerhouse.
This thing is going... I think vampires are... If they weren't viable before, and that was questionable, they are viable now.
Now, you'll
really
notice
strong.
this doesn't look like the rest of the vampires. It's not a life linker, it doesn't make tokens, it doesn't... You know, it's not the usual what we've seen.
It's a life linker. It just goes directly.
Right. It just takes out the middleman.
It just goes straight for their dome.
How is this in Commander?
Oh, it's still phenomenally good. Again, my attention to it was drawn to the fact of I read the card's ability and I immediately did a double check glance up to see if it had the legendary keyword or not. Because if this was a commander, it would be retarded.
Now you will notice, of course, James, that you have to be careful with when you play this card.
Oh, absolutely.
Without Ascend, it's just a 2/4 flyer for 4.
Absolutely.
Which not going to do a whole lot for you. But at the right time, once you do have Ascend, totally worth it.
Now, speaking of things that are worth and ascending, we have a flyer. It's a 4/3 Rekindling Phoenix. It's a Firebird Owl. It's kind of awesome. It's a 4...
In my opinion, one of the
CMC.
most beautiful red creatures they've printed in a long time.
Absolutely.
And this isn't a set where the dinosaurs look phenomenal.
This in foil is going to be amazing. And while they had to make the art really phenomenal to steal some thunder away from the Thunder Lizards in the set.
Right.
So it's a flyer. When Rekindling Phoenix dies, and this is a really cool mechanic, by the way, create a 0/1 red elemental creature token. The token has, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature and return target card named Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains haste until end of turn. So target card. So if this thing dies, if you put, I don't know, Journey to Eternity on it, and you had another one in the graveyard, you get 2 for the price of 1.
Exactly. And it's interesting, they've tried this kind of mechanic before in Chandra's Phoenix. Any of the Phoenixes you're going to see, there's going to be some way to bring them back.
This mechanic actually reminds me less of the Phoenixes. I mean, obviously it's a Phoenix, so it's going to return. This reminds me of the Orzhov Angel that makes a cleric. The Death Pact Angel?
I can't remember the name of it exactly, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I think it's Death Pact Angel.
But I will say, of the Phoenixes, I think this one... Now, this one doesn't have haste like some of the others, but this one is the
It gains it when it comes back.
to bring back. This one is the most successful, and you have to do the least in order to get it back. Because remember, if they want to kill it, they also have to then kill the token.
To be fair, that's not difficult.
No, but it feels bad. You have to spend 2 removal spells to keep one thing dead.
You're going to try to sweep it with some other stuff.
Right,
But
exactly.
it's a 0/1, so that's not difficult. Alright, speaking of things that there are more than one of it, the Polyraptor. Does it want a cracker?
It does want a cracker. It's possibly one of the most brewed with cards of the spoiler season, in that people have been looking back through the pages of Magic's history to find all of the ways that you can interact with this card.
Infinitely.
It's very simple, though.
There's a lot of them.
It's a 5/5 for 8, so there's got to be something going on here, with a very simple line of text. Enrage. Whenever Polyraptor is dealt damage, not from any source, doesn't matter who does it, create a token that is a copy of Polyraptor. Which, of course, the token will then have that Enrage ability.
And so you're looking at cards from Magic history that say when a creature enters the battlefield, it deals damage to other things, or things are dealt damage, and there's a few of them, actually.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, it's an interesting beast. Let's look at the Bishop of Binding. It's another vampire cleric. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Bishop of Binding leaves the battlefield. So we have another O-ring on a body. Whenever Bishop of Binding attacks, X. Target vampire gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the power of the exiled card. It can pump itself, which you might do because it's a 1/1 for 4.
Right.
So if you basically what this is going to do, much like the dinosaur, is it's going to come in, it's going to get something out of the way, but unlike the dinosaur, it's going to go, this is a giant blocker that this normally couldn't kill. I'm going to remove it, and then I'll just carry it every time I attack.
Yes.
Functionally, what I like to think this vampire is doing is he's not exiling your creature. He's stealing it and beating you with it.
Take this creature.
It's like a fling that keeps on giving.
Now, assuming that for some reason your opponent feels generous enough to let an attacking 1/1 live, say all their creatures are tapped or they're in some way unable to kill him through blocking, giving that attack buff to a vampire with lifelink could be game-breaking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you've just taken what is probably going to be their biggest, baddest threat.
Absolutely. Speaking of taking stuff, we have a Crafty Cup Purse, a 2/2 for 4, so it's slightly bigger than the vampire. It has flash. When it enters the battlefield, each token that would be created under an opponent's control this turn is created under your control instead.
Anyone who thinks that they haven't been printing cards specifically for Commander and Standard needs to take a good long look at this Crafty Cut Purse.
I don't know how I feel about this guy, because
I love it.
it's a cool thing, but you're notion thieving their Avenger of Zendikar.
Right.
The uses seem a little smaller.
Not everything that's a token is a creature.
This is also completely true. So if they're going to be sitting there going, aha, I'm going to create my Storm the Vault and swing in for my 5 dudes. By the way, yeah, no, those are my tokens now.
This is perhaps the best answer for Polyraptor.
Yes. He's going to steal the Polyraptors?
He's going to steal the Polyraptors.
Why were they keeping the Polyraptors in their purse?
Just depends on how crafty they are.
I didn't know Bag of Holdings existed in Ixalan.
All in all, is he a good creature? Is he a good effect? Yes.
In the right situation. He seems highly situational, which to me, again, like you said, this seems like a commander card.
Either commander or definitely at the very least sideboard.
Yeah, it would be a sideboard if tokens start becoming a big problem, which I don't know if that's really a thing at the moment. Now, what'd be funny, would be really funny, you wouldn't be able to get value off of it, but it would be rude, is you steal their 0/1 red Phoenix Elemental token and go, well, I can't get your Phoenix back, but I'm still going to sacrifice it at the beginning of my turn.
I think this is a herald of the fact that they're planning to very shortly unban the multiple infinite combo card from Modern. Splitting Image or whatever it was. I can't even remember.
Splinter Twin?
Splinter Twin, yes. This will be what finally enables Splinter Twin to become unbanned.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
The Champion of Dusk is our next one. He's a 4/4 for 5. Alright, we're slowly approaching creature equity again. It's a Vampire Knight. When he enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. Simply worded, simply stated, really powerful.
You do have to lose the life, which honestly in a vampire deck you're probably not going to care because there's so many ways to gain life. Now, so you have to think, why did they make him like 5 instead of like 2 or something? Well, because they wanted to give him a good body. The fact that he's a 4/4 for 5 is but he's still a 4/4, which is a bigger than a lot of the other vampires that are running around at the 2 and 1 drop
Because
level.
vampires tend to either be really small or really big, and it's nice to see some vampires that are kind of in the middle.
Right. And not only that, but they had to cost him later in the game.
Yes.
Because of the nature of his effect.
If you drop him on turn 1,
it doesn't do any. Well, it doesn't do much.
yeah, it doesn't do much.
So this guy is designed to be not the coup de grace, but the refilling. So you're playing a low to the ground vampire deck. You play turn 1 vampire, turn 2 vampire, turn 3 2 vampires, or maybe a vampire and a removal spell. You know, turn 5 comes around, you play this guy. You're running out of vampires at this point. You draw some more based on the number that you have, or how many tokens you have, anything like that, and he kind of refills your hand for you.
Yeah, you want to play him definitely later in the day rather than earlier, because he is involved with dusk. So as the day gets later and as, the battlefield is more bloodied.
Right.
Speaking of bloodies and days, segue to Blood Sun. This card, I think, is going to be... It's definitely provoking a lot of discussion.
Absolutely.
Because Blood Sun, much like the similarly named Blood Moon, costs a red and 2. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. All lands lose all abilities except mana abilities.
And the entire Magic the Gathering player base had to collectively remind themselves of how layers work.
Yeah.
Is it good?
I think, here's the situation. Because my first thought would be, it would be kind of janky to run a deck that ran Blood Sun and Blood Moon for the flavor. But I cannot imagine a situation where you would be running Blood Sun and Blood Moon and not just want Blood Moon. Unless your deck had, as I stated before, lands that had special mana abilities, like the Tolarian Academy style lands or the Gaia's Cradle style lands, where you're going to be tapping for more mana, and they're not. That's the only reason I would want a Blood Sun over a Blood Moon.
Now, I will tell you this much, and this is something that was pointed out to me. Blood Sun is more effective against fetch lands.
Well, Blood Moon also does the same to fetch lands.
But it makes them tap for mana. This means they can't tap for anything.
This is true.
So, essentially, Blood Sun and Blood Moon, just like in the real world, are probably not going to be played together, or at least at the same time, because they kind of do similar enough things.
There's only one instance in this world where Sun and Moon are played together, and that's Pokemon Kids.
Now, will it replace Blood Moon? I doubt it. But is it an alternative for people who can't afford it? Or will it see play potentially in standard sideboards? Yes.
I could see it maybe seeing play in like a Blood Moon Light, where you could bring it in against some decks that are like using land abilities, like Dark Depths or... again, I'd have to see it because you're going to shut off fetch lands. So maybe you want a Blood Moon-like effect, but you also still want to do some stuff with your land, so it's like a soft Blood Moon. But again, I'd have to see the shell for this to be convinced.
And as far as card advantage is concerned, it does draw you a card.
It does.
And so it does make it safer to run multiple copies of it.
So now we get to the Professor's card, the Deeproot Elite.
And
it's a 1/1 that costs 2. Whenever another merfolk enters the battlefield, because it's a merfolk warrior, by the way, whenever another merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target merfolk you control.
This, besides the Tyrant himself, is the most expensive pre-order of the merfolk tribe. And that is because of the insane amount of flexibility and longevity he gives your merfolk deck. So you drop this guy on turn 2, every merfolk you play thereafter gets additional value, whether you're putting the counters on him, someone else, something that's hexproof, something that's unblockable, something that needs a counter so River of Heralds can make it unblockable. This guy, if merfolks become more viable, which based on some of the other things printed in this set, I'd say that's definitely the case.
We might see that, yeah.
He will definitely be at the heart of the merfolk tribe.
Let's look at the Paladin of Atonement. A Vampire Knight, at the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Paladin of Atonement. When Paladin of Atonement dies, you gain life equal to its toughness. It's a 1/1 for 2.
Right.
That, I think, as a rare, and as a Vampire Knight, and as something that gains you life back and or just gets bigger and harder to deal with, I think this is a solid creature.
This is a reverse Ajani's Pridemate. Ajani's Pridemate gets bigger the more life you gain. This guy gets bigger the more life you lose. Or rather, the more often you lose.
The more often you lose life last turn.
You have to assume that a lot of the strategies in Standard are, besides Approach with the Second Sun, are going to try to win through damage of some sort. Even some of the control decks that are running like Scarab God or something. So given enough time of him not getting killed, he will get bigger, and then when he does get bigger, again, like the vampire we saw earlier, you get additional value. Flavor-wise, I'm conflicted because I love paladins, but paladins traditionally dislike vampires, so it's a very conflicting time to be alive.
That's why he's a Tony.
Right. That's a good point.
So let's look at Release to the Wind. It's a 2 blue instant, or 2 and a blue instant. Exile target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it without paying its mana cost. This is strictly a I need you out of the way for this combat type of card.
Now, it is interesting to note they can only cast it when they could ordinarily cast it.
This is true.
So even though it's free,
anything fancy,
right? It's not a part of the resolution of the spell.
It's a flicker that the owner decides when it comes back.
Well, and not only that, but you can use it on your own things as well. So there is some flexibility there. Say they go to kill or exile your creature, and you want to say no,
Or
we'll do that later.
You just ETB something.
Exactly.
That is true. I didn't think of those applications.
So it's a little flexible. Will it see a lot of play? I'm not sure. Again, only because it just gets something out of the way.
The dead man's chest is a 1 and a black enchantment aura. Enchant creature an opponent controls. When enchanted creature dies, exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library. You may cast non-land cards from among them for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells.
Honestly, I really like it, just because it's so unique. We haven't really seen a whole lot like it before, and it's just a cool card. Flavor-wise, effect-wise, it's just cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious to see if it finds a home somewhere. I'm not sure that it will. It seems like too much setup involved.
So, essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to enchant one of their early drop high-power creatures, or even late game, and then pretty much immediately kill it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't have flash, so it's not like you can block something with, when your creature has death touch, flash it in, anything like that.
Then you're going to see this coming.
But, so, in other words, you're telling your opponent, I'm going to try to kill your guy. And when I do, it's going to be even worse for you than usual.
It's going to be even more bountiful, like Brass's Bounty, a 6 and a red sorcery. So, if you've watched the recent videos from the professor, he makes frequent cracks at Wizards for making things cost 7, and it's all fun and games, but there's a lot of 7 drops in this set.
More than usual.
Yeah. So, what does the bounty do? For each land you control, create a colorless treasure artifact token. So, for the cost of 7 mana, if you're paying it honestly, you untap with 14 mana next turn.
Right. Here's Red's attempt at doubling mana.
If you are paying for this honestly, you are basically saying, I am casting this spell, I am ticking up my storm count by 1 for no cost.
Right.
Functionally is what's going on.
Well, and you could say any or all of those artifacts for the next turn. So say next turn you plan to win, but you need 14 mana to do it. This will get you there.
Yeah.
It's no mana geyser, though.
This is a card to accelerate things like Revel in Riches.
Right.
If you're on the win through treasure plan.
Or remember that enchantment we saw not too long ago that flips
into treasures.
If you have this with that, it could be really potent.
The next card is the Jade Light Ranger. It's a 2/1 for 3 Merfolk Scout.
Also expensive.
When it enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again.
So, Wizards took a step back and they said, what do people like? I know. They like Coiling Oracle. People love Coiling Oracle. What if we print a Coiling Oracle that doubles Coiling Oracle? That's a fantastic idea.
How do we balance this? We'll make it cost 1 more mana, but not 2 different kinds of mana.
So let's think about the various ways this can break down. It can draw you 2 lands. It can reveal something that's not a land that you could either put in the graveyard or keep on top. And then the next card after that could either then be a land which you would draw, or a card that you could put in the graveyard.
So you're either getting 2 lands a land and a 3/2,
Right.
or a 4/3.
Exactly. With
For
some,
3.
with some deck manipulation, depending. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's not bad. Even if it's just a 2/1 that drew you past 2 lands, that could be valuable. Or even if it's a 3/2 that offered some top of deck manipulation. And again, don't forget those are +1 counters, which, as we've already seen, matter in Merfolk decks.
They do. Radiant Destiny. It is a 2 and a white enchantment.
Yes.
Not legendary enchantment. Enchantment.
With Ascend.
So, if you control the city's blessing, what do you get? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. As Radiant Destiny enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. As long as you have the city's blessing, they also have vigilance.
You have to think how long they thought about whether or not to make this an artifact, as opposed to just because the tribes that can use it currently would be pretty much just vampires and dinosaurs. The pirates don't really get into white much, and neither do the merfolk. So again, this is really going to be mostly for, I would say, the vampire decks.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the dinosaur decks are going to care about their 6/6s being 7/7s as much.
I mean, vigilance.
The vigilance, though, is very, very nice no matter who you are.
Alright, let's look at Induced Amnesia. 2 and a blue. There's a lot of 2 and a something cards in this set.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's good.
When Induced Amnesia enters the battlefield, it's an enchantment, by the way. Target player exiles all cards from his or her hand face down, then draws that many cards. When Induced Amnesia is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return the exiled cards that are in his hand. It's a wheel that you can use on yourself, if you just have garbage in your hand, or you can use it on your opponent to screw with their plan. I think it's pretty solid.
It's really not bad. It reminds me a lot of Scroll Rack.
Excepting you can force your opponent to do it.
Exactly.
The Dire Fleet Poisoner is a 2/2 for 2. We have, at last, a bear. It has Flash, okay. It has Death Touch, double okay. When it enters the battlefield, target attacking pirate you control gets +1/+1 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. So there's a couple avenues in which you can play this.
This is a very tricky card. Its third line of text is going to convince most, if not all, especially newer players, that it's designed to be played on the attack, which is definitely true. Say you attack with something that has no business attacking, and they block with something that has a lot of business blocking, like a huge blocker, you can say, okay, I want that thing to die. Let's give something that's being blocked Death Touch. Very, very good. But don't also forget that it itself is just essentially
an Ambush Viper.
Yeah, an Ambush Viper. 2-drop, destroy target attacking creature. You know,
it's a Doomblade. It's a Doomblade that can target an attacking creature.
Exactly. So honestly, this is a really solid card.
It's a really versatile card, and it's a bear.
Right.
So it's just good anyway.
And just look at that plumage. Those feathers are incredible.
Okay, you're talking about the feathers. The Dire Fleet Daredevil, a 2/1 for 2. First strike human pirate. When it enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast that card this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. If the card were to be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So it gives an instant or sorcery in an opponent's graveyard.
Correct.
Flashback.
This is a red Snapcaster Mage
that can only hit an opponent.
Right.
You're right, it is a Snapcaster because it's a first strike.
It's a reverse Snapcaster.
Now, here's the thing. In a deck that runs snaps, would you run this also to steal your opponents if you board it in the mirror as like a mirror snap?
It would definitely have to come in off the sideboard, if only because you don't know exactly what instants and sorceries
depending on the
running.
format, it might just be there, because here's the thing.
Tron doesn't run a lot of them, though.
Here's the thing. I actually could see this card showing up in Vintage.
Really?
Oh yeah, because Snapcaster is huge in Vintage. This beats Snapcaster in a fight because it has first strike. You can run it in a lot of the same decks as Snapcaster, and there are spells everywhere. Oh, your opponent just cast an Ancestral Recall? Cool, I'll take it.
Now, I will note this doesn't have Flash like Snapcaster.
This is true.
So
you
it's,
have to
it's
play
not
it
as
honestly.
responsive. It's a sorcery speed effect.
So you trade out the flash for the first strike, but you can still go, I have a red, a blue, and some other mana in Vintage. I'm going to go, I'll tap 3 mana to get a 2/1, steal your Ancestral Recall, which screws you up for delving, and your own snaps. So I'd basically be forcing you to use a snap in response that I might have something set up for.
And you wouldn't even need the blue.
Well, also, if you're using this to snap back like an
If
Ancestral
it were
Recall.
mana of any type to cast.
Oh yeah,
that
so you could
spell.
just tap colorless and go for it.
Mhm.
I'd be curious. I know people are going to try it out. I'd be curious to see if it takes hold.
This card, at the time of this video, is pre-ordering for $15 a piece.
What?
People are believing in this card.
Oh, I'm sure, because it's a Snapcaster.
The fact that it's a rare is going to really help with actually wanting to acquire. If this were a mythic, this card would be expensive. It's already going to be expensive,
It
but
already
at
is.
least it's a rare.
All right. We will discover what lies ahead on it in its path. The Path of Discovery, 3 and a green, enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores. That's pretty solid if you're running Merfolk.
It's pretty solid if you're running creatures.
I mean, it's true. Do you run creatures? Do you have, nothing to do on turn 4? You too could discover what lies on this path.
So again, this is a kind
Might
of
be land, might be
quadly
counters.
style effect like we saw earlier, to where the creature decks run out of things to do, to where they want their creatures entering the battlefield and the fact that they're playing creatures to be rewarded. This card just does that. It says every creature you play after this gets additional value. Now, they've printed cards like this before with like Oath of the Druids or whatever. I think this is a phenomenal version of it. Because again, it turns every creature in your deck into a coiling oracle.
And on that note, we're taking a short break.